Welcome to today's episode of the Adapted Ambitions podcast. Today, we are going to be speaking about why smart people make bad decisions. We've all been there. I've been guilty of this myself as well. You know that you should be making better decisions, but you make decisions based out of fear and based out of the thing that you're trying to get away from rather than the thing that you should be moving towards. And we've seen it multiple times. So, for example, you'll have a brilliant engineer who takes on a role because of a title, even though the scope of the role is terrible, or a senior researcher who joins a startup for the equity, even though the founders have no track record. Or you'll see a VP take on a job because the compensation is high, even though the culture is clearly toxic. Or a quant researcher accepting a counter offer to stay on at their current employer, even though they're no longer aligned with the values and culture of the company, and they stay on because they've been offered more compensation or the promise of a promotion, despite being let down multiple times. So there are multiple scenarios where this happens time and time again. And oftentimes you'll find that 6 months later, people will be regretting their decisions. I've often, in the past, I'll get calls sort of saying to me 6 months later, Ada, I wish I had chosen differently. So why do people who are extremely smart, typically exceptional at their jobs, why do they make terrible career decisions? And more importantly, how can you avoid it if you find yourself in this situation? I'm Ada Offonry, and this is the Adapted Ambitions podcast. So let's dive in and let's look at what's actually happening. In the US, 72% of professionals say that they accepted a job they later regretted, usually within the first 6 months. And the top reasons for this regret was misaligned expectations, bad cultural fit, or a manager who oversold the role. Very bad, very, very bad. And here's what's really interesting. In the UK, 58% of mid-career professionals say that they stayed in a role too long out of fear. And they were scared of a change. They were scared of the unknown. They were scared of starting over. And what's really interesting is that the higher your salary, the more likely you are to make decisions based on comp alone. And this often leads to some of the biggest regrets that I see. So why does this happen? Why is it that smart people who are brilliant at solving complex technical problems struggle so much with career decisions? Let me break it down into 5 of the biggest traps that I often see. The first of these traps is optimizing for the wrong thing. You find this when people optimize for one thing and then they ignore everything else. So examples, if you're somebody who's really optimizing based on titles, you take a VP or director title, even though you hate managing people. Or if you're optimizing on salary alone, you take the highest paying offer at a company, even though you have to work an 80-hour week and commute for very long hours. Or if you're optimizing based on brand name alone, at companies like Google or Meta or OpenAI, you take the offer, even though you might find the work boring. Maybe not so much OpenAI, but you know what I mean. Here's the fix. Before you evaluate any opportunity, you really need to get clear on your personal priorities. That's really important. And I often see people making decisions based on the opportunities they have in front of them rather than starting internally. And you have to be clear on what matters right now and what matters to you in the medium to long term. Sometimes you'll be making a decision highly focused on the short term. That's okay. Sometimes you'll be making a decision more focused on your medium to long term. That's okay as well, but you need to be clear on that. And then you need to be clear on on the things that matter to you. Is it comp? Is it scope? Is it learning? Is it flexibility, manager, quality, team dynamics? Is the role a holding point for you before a pivot? You need to be very clear on this, and you need to rank them and really be honest with yourself. And you also need to score each opportunity across all the dimensions that I mentioned beforehand, and not just that which is easiest to measure. I've seen instances where someone will take on a role that's 10 out of 10 on comp, but 3 out of 10 on everything else. And then they're miserable, right? You have the comp you wanted, but you absolutely hate everything else about your position. So the question you've got to be asking yourself is, what am I optimizing for right now? Is it actually what I want, or is it what I think I'm supposed to want? The second decision-making trap that I often see smarter people making when they're making bad decisions is they decide based on what they're leaving rather than what they're moving forward to. So an example is you have a really bad manager and you take the first offer you get from another company without really checking out the new company properly, or you're bored and so you jump into a role that sounds exciting without thinking it through but might be extremely risky, or you're frustrated and your manager says something to you and it's the straw that breaks the camel's back and then you quit without having a backup plan. Obviously, this is really reactionary decision making and it almost always backfires. It works out for some people, but for many people, what it does is it induces a considerable period of stress. And, you want to be sure that you're moving towards something better and you're not just running away from something bad. And so you want to give yourself the opportunity to be able to properly validate your next move, whether that's a job, entrepreneurship, a break. And you want to ensure that 6 months down the line, a year down the line, you're not in a different bad situation. So the fix is before you leave your current position or before you make the decision whether to leave or stay, don't make the decision purely based on what you're running from. Make it based on what you're running towards. What do you actually want in your next role? How do you actually want to live in your next chapter? And this is not the anything but this current thing mentality, but this is specifically about what is my ideal scenario in terms of how I want to live moving forward. And ask yourself, am I making the decision to escape something or am I making the decision to move towards something? The third decision-making trap that I see smart people making is trusting words over evidence. A lot of people tend to believe what a prospective hiring manager tells them during interviews. And I'm always surprised by the number of people who don't validate it. So consider this. You're in a final interview for a company that you're really excited to work for. And surprisingly, you've really clicked with the hiring manager who's been interviewing you. And you're so excited about the prospect of working for the company. And she tells you that, the company that you're interviewing for has a really great culture, has really great work-life balance, and they enjoy people having their autonomy. And you believe them, right? Why shouldn't you? Because they're saying exactly what you want to hear. But the reality is that words are cheap. Evidence is what matters. I often say to people, when you're going into those final interviews, you really need to have quality questions. People often focus on trying to prove that they're the right person for the job and not enough focus on trying to prove that the opportunity is the right one for them. So you've got to go in with really quality questions. So you're not asking questions like, tell me what the culture's like, but you want to ask more defined questions such as, when was the last time someone took a week off? What happened when they were gone? What was the process of kind of organizing the work in their absence? You're not asking, will I have autonomy or how much autonomy will I have? But you're asking, can you walk me through a recent decision that the team made? What sort of input the various members of the team have in that decision? And then this is really critical, this back channel that people often don't utilize. And that's talking to people that work in the company that you're interviewing for or who used to work in the company that you're interviewing for. It's important that you try to find out what the company is actually like. I've done this before accepting an offer, checking the back channel, speaking to people who've worked in those companies. And sometimes those people won't necessarily say positive things about the company. That hasn't necessarily deterred me. If the things that they were negative about, I felt were covered during the interview or didn't really matter to me. But if they addressed negative things that really mattered to me, then that was my cue to either dig further or to look elsewhere for another opportunity. So the question you've got to ask yourself is, am I believing what people are saying, or have I taken the time to really validate this? Let's look at the fourth decision-making trap that smart people often make, which is letting sunk costs drive your decisions. So people like to stay in bad situations where they've already invested a lot of time and effort and resources. And, a lot of people will say stuff like, I've been here for 7 years. It'd be a waste to leave now. Or I just got promoted. I need to stay another 2 years to make it worth it. Or, I haven't worked worked in this company for up to a year and I have to be in a company for a year. Otherwise, the job market punishes me for it. Or I've earned, my deferred bonus. So I'm going to stay another year to ensure that this gets paid out to me. This is the sunk cost fallacy, and it keeps people trapped in bad situations for far longer than they should be. The fix is that the time you've already spent doesn't matter as much as you think it does, at least in the grand scheme of things. That time is gone. You can't have it back. And the only question that matters is, if I were making this decision from scratch today, knowing what I know now, would I still choose this? Let me say that again. If I were making this decision from scratch today, knowing what I know now, would I still choose this? And if the answer is no, the sunk cost is irrelevant. You need to move. You also need to consider the opportunity cost of you investing more time and effort and resources into a role and a company or a situation that you're no longer suited to in the long term. The question you got to ask yourself is, am I staying because it's the right choice or because I've already invested so much? Let's look at trap number 5, which is overvaluing certainty. Many people stay in mediocre situations because it's familiar, it's certain, they're comfortable, they don't want to really rock the boat too much. The job is fine, the team is fine, the company is fine, the compensation is fine. It's not great, but it's safe, right? And it's what they've known for multiple years. And they know people there, they have relationships there. They're not best friends, but they get on and it's okay. And they can kind of coast a little bit in the role because they've already kind of proven themselves. And so these people will turn down opportunities where they could be great because there's greater risk involved. They might have to prove themselves again, and they don't necessarily want to start from scratch. They don't want to become more visible because they worry about how others will perceive them because they've been guilty of judging others as well. The thing to realize here is that certainty is an illusion, especially in today's job market. In today's workplace, certainty is an illusion. Your safe job could disappear tomorrow, and I don't want to be a fearmonger, but that's the reality. I spoke in earlier episodes about, tech giants like Google and Meta and, Amazon laying off thousands of people. The reality is that your company could be acquired, your manager could leave, the team could dissolve, budget could be cut, AI could transform your industry and render your role obsolete. So there's no such thing as a risk-free decision. The fix here is you can't compare a risky opportunity with a safe current situation. What you can compare is a risky current situation with a risky opportunity, because either way, there's risk. It's just about the risk that you're more familiar with. The question is, which risk are you willing to take? Are you staying because it's safe, or are you staying because it's familiar? So let's talk a little bit about the decision framework that actually works and that could help advance you if you find yourself in any of the scenarios that I've just been speaking about. How do you actually get to make better decisions as a smart person? I'm going to share with you the framework that I use with every advisory client that I work with who's looking to consider whether they should stay on in their current role and come up with an evolution plan, or whether they should transition into another job or another style of working, etc. Step number 1, you need to get very clear on your priorities. You need to rank them and be clear on what your top 5 are. And so this could be around salary and compensation, scope of the role, learning opportunities, manager quality, the team that you'll be joining, the location, the title, the flexibility, whatever matters to you. Write all of these down and identify your top 5. Then the second step is you need to score each opportunity across all of the dimensions. So not just the exciting ones, but all of them. Use a 1 to 10 scale, right? So based on your current situation, or based on the offer that you're currently reviewing, the opportunity you're currently reviewing, how does it score for when it comes to compensation, when it comes to learning, when it comes to etc., right? So be brutally honest here and don't just sort of score a bit higher because you really want the company, etc. Step number 3 3, look for your deal breakers. So, is there anything for you that is a hard no? For many people, it tends to be a terrible commute or a manager that they just didn't really click with, or what feels like it could be a toxic culture, or salary below a certain level. Be clear on that, right? Because it doesn't matter how high comp is, for example, if you have deal breakers that are available, then maybe that's your cue that this isn't your opportunity. Step number 4, you need to run the regret test. What does this mean? The regret test is when you kind of play things forward. So think about yourself 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, and you look back on this job or opportunity. Let's say you chose to stay at your current company. What is the worst case scenario? And can you live with this worst case scenario? If you can't live with the worst case scenario, then make the opposite decision, right? So if staying at your current role, the worst case scenario is, for example, your income stagnates and doesn't move forward, and it's not something you can live with because maybe you have financial goals far beyond what your current compensation is, then you know that a key decision for you is to move on from where you are, is to leave. Step number 5, get an outside perspective. And I don't mean speaking to somebody who has a direct stake in your decision. That's why oftentimes people struggle if they're speaking to a sibling or they're speaking to their partner, because these people have an active stake in the outcome of, whatever decision you make. Try to speak to somebody who isn't as emotionally invested in the decision. This could be a mentor, a sponsor, a colleague that you really admire, a friend who is quite objective. This is why people come to coaches or advisors such as myself. Somebody who will provide a space for you to kind of work through your feelings around the opportunity and the decisions that you need to make. The thing here to note is that even if you use this 5-step process that I've outlined around being clear on your priorities, scoring each opportunity across all dimensions, looking out for deal breakers, running the regret test, and getting an outside perspective, the reality is that there'll still be trade-offs, right? If, for example, you decide that the key thing that you want to advance over the next few years is your compensation, then it might be that you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to work longer hours for the next few years because this is what I need to be able to get me to the income level that I'm interested in. And that's okay as long as you're clear on what those trade-offs are and you're willing to make them. So I want to leave you with 3 key action points that you can take this week if you find yourself in a situation where you're having to make a decision. The first thing is evaluate your opportunity right now. Use the decision scorecard. List your top 5 priorities. Score each of these opportunities on a 1 to 10 dimension, and look at what the data tells you, not just your gut, but look at what the data tells you. You might think that you want the high paying role, but when you actually test it across the scope and the learning and the work-life balance, you realize that might not necessarily be the winner. Number 2, second action point, if you're in a role and you currently feel stuck, you need to run the sunk cost test. And you need to ask yourself, if you're making the decision from scratch today, knowing what you know now, would you still choose this? Because if the answer is no, then you need to start building your exit plan quietly, strategically, but you need to start. The third thing is that if you're about to make a move, you need to definitely do the back channel reference check. So don't just talk to the people that you're, the prospective company you're thinking of joining might give you as references, because those people are typically vetted. But find your own people on LinkedIn. I've reached out to people on LinkedIn and people have been very willing to at least have a conversation with me. And sometimes, they might not necessarily be explicit about negative things about their previous employers, but you'll be able to read between the lines. You will be. So reach out on LinkedIn, ask people what it's like to truly work at those companies, because you need the truth and not a sales pitch. So If you're navigating a high stakes career decision right now and you need help working through this framework, scoring your options, stress testing your thinking, making sure that you're not falling into one of these traps, then I work one-to-one with senior and technical professionals on exactly this. I'll walk them through their options systematically. We'll back channel the companies that you're considering. We'll build your negotiation strategy. You can learn more at over-optimising.com. And if you want weekly insights into decision making, career strategy, market intelligence, you can join my newsletter at over-optimising.com. You'll also be able to get my free career decision scorecard there. So that's it for this episode. If you haven't already, do subscribe and do give us a review. It makes a difference in helping to spread the word about Adapted Ambitions. I'm Ada. You've been listening to the Adapted Ambitions podcast. See you next time.